Welcome to The Author Show, where we present new authors and books. From fiction to self-help and everything in between, you'll find it all here. To watch the TV version of our program, visit authorswebtv.com. That's authorswebtv.com. And now, let the show begin.
Hello and welcome back to the show. This is your host, Don McCauley. Today we're welcoming program author Brian Aull, and Brian is the author of The Triad, 3 Civic Virtues That Could Save American Democracy. Brian was born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana. He studied electrical engineering, first at Purdue and then at MIT, where he got his doctoral degree in 1985. A research scientist at MIT and a passionate educator, he's also interested in fresh approaches to solving society's pressing problems. Brian, how are you?
Good. How are you, Don?
Good. Well, let's start with a big question. Tell us about this book, please.
So the book, as you said, is called The Triad, 3 Civic Virtues That Could Save American Democracy. And the reason I wrote the book is because I've been increasingly concerned about the atmosphere of divisiveness, the declining civility in American politics, the gridlock in Washington. And, you go out on social media and other places, and it feels like an angry shouting match. And I wrote the book to help make the tone of the conversation more constructive.
Who did you write this book for specifically?
Americans who care and are looking for solutions to our country's problems.
So would you say there's any type of central message or perhaps underlying theme that you could say runs throughout the book?
Yes, there is, Don. The things that we need to fix Washington actually reside outside of Washington. In homes, in churches, in schools, businesses, in volunteer organizations. So the theme here is that the pillars of a better democracy and a better government are civically engaged citizens, strong philanthropic organizations, socially responsible business enterprises, and universal quality education.
If you had to choose, what would you say is the single most important idea you're sharing in your book that's really going to add value to the reader's life?
Well, I found a quote that sums that up, and it's by Edmund Burke, and he said, "Nobody makes a greater mistake than the man who does nothing because he can do only a little bit." So the idea here is the individual is powerful. You can make a difference.
If you could compare your book with any book out there we might already be familiar with, which book would it be and why?
So Senator Olympia Snowe of the state of Maine recently wrote a book called Fighting for Common Ground, and she recently left the U.S. Senate because of the dysfunction of that body. And in her career as a legislator, she exemplified bipartisan collaboration on a lot of issues. So in this book, she documents how much worse the gridlock and the divisiveness has become since she was first elected in 1994 to the U.S. Senate.
What inspired you to write this book?
Well, 20 years ago, I worked with a man named Nathan Rutstein on some race relations issues, and he was urging me to write the book back then, and the time just wasn't right. But he inspired me, and the book is dedicated to his memory.
So what is it that makes The Triad different from other books on gridlock and political dysfunction?
A lot of the books focus on reforms. For example, campaign finance laws to limit the influence of big money on politics. Some books blame specific groups of people or specific people. Some books blame the president or the Republicans in Congress. I saw one book that says the culprit is Hollywood stars absconding with our tax money. So my goal here is to say, hey, take a deep breath, step back, let's think about how each of us might have something valuable to contribute to the solution instead of pointing fingers of blame at other people. So a whole lot of this is about changing the moral climate, and that's the reason why the book focuses on civic virtues.
So what are the 3 virtues referred to in the subtitle?
Service, learning, and community building.
And how are those virtues going to help us find solutions to gridlocks?
The book discusses many ways, but I'll give one example of each, Don. Citizens motivated by a spirit of service give political leaders permission to work for the common good, whereas when you have an electorate divided into blocks of pocketbook voters, that creates special interests, and that incentivizes politicians to pander to those special interests. So that's the first one, service. Learning. If we value learning, we don't elect leaders who act as if they have nothing to learn. And community, if we value having authentic communities in our neighborhoods, our businesses, our churches, then we hold leaders accountable to value the same thing.
What is the Gallant effect?
Gallant is an alias for an actual company. It's a warehouse shopping chain. This warehouse shopping chain has succeeded as a business by actually paying its workers a living wage and providing good health benefits and promoting a corporate culture of collaboration and teamwork in the company. And so this illustrates a general principle that there's no conflict between striving for individual excellence and building strong communities. So the Gallant effect is the name that I coined for the healthy functioning of any kind of organization, team, organism, or society that results from the collaborative functioning of diverse parts.
Now, you claim to bridge the left-right divide. Do you think that's really possible?
I absolutely do. I think that the liberal and conservative philosophies are actually inspired by fundamental values that are not in conflict, and the Gallant corporate culture illustrates that. So valuing individual excellence and individual achievement, which inspires conservative thought, is not in conflict with recognizing our common interests, which inspires liberal thought. So the problem occurs, or the division occurs, when partisan loyalty takes on a life of its own, or when broad human values morph into rigid and dogmatic prescriptions.
What do you mean by political ambidexterity?
To be ambidextrous is to be able to drop those labels, liberal and conservative, from one's thinking about issues. Right? Think broadly about your values, but also apply them with flexibility and practicality. So a key piece of this is looking at issues fair-mindedly, looking at all the facts, rather than selectively looking at the facts that reinforce preconceived biases. So I give a personal example of this, the evolution of my own views on rent control. I moved away from a knee-jerk ideological position on rent control in favor of a more thoughtful view based on better understanding the unintended consequences of rent control ordinances.
Now, do you really think we can have, as you call it, capitalism with a social conscience?
I absolutely do, and that's why the narrative is woven around these specific examples, like this retail shopping chain that I call Gallant. Another example is a health maintenance organization in Grand Junction, Colorado, and they came up with the creative solutions to providing affordable health care to everyone in that county, and they did that by exemplifying the three civic virtues.
Now, the chapter on race relations is one of the longest. What are you trying to accomplish with that?
Well, I want the reader to understand that colonialism and slavery were not minor supplements when it came to building up the wealth of the Western world. In fact, they were a major chunk of building that wealth. So a lot of that chapter recalls the history of colonialism and slavery and how racial ideas arose to defend those institutions. So for the white reader, I'm hoping to make the point that even if we have progressive opinions on race, we still have a lot of deeply embedded feelings that result from being socialized in a culture that has a long history of white supremacy. So to move us forward, whites, like myself, have to work to overcome a subconscious sense of superiority and build relationships and communities that transcend racial lines.
Why is the reconciliation of science and religion important to you?
Because when those two things are at war with each other, the ability of a society to solve problems is seriously hampered. Think about it. As a society, we need broadly shared values, such as the Golden Rule, right? The teaching of our religions that we should treat each other as we ourselves want to be treated. But we also need to be able to look at facts and evidence in a fair-minded way. We have to be willing to experiment. We have to be willing to learn from experience. And those are the things that science teaches us. So really the theme of that discussion in the book is that science and religion, when properly understood, are complementary windows on reality. And if they're in conflict, it's because one or both of them is being distorted in some way or misunderstood.
You've also included a chapter on education. How, in your opinion, do we fix the school system?
One sense that it's about valuing the teaching profession. Right? The school teachers really should be society's most prestigious profession. And I point out that teachers only make about 1/2 of what lawyers make and about only 1/3 of what surgeons make. So a good teacher really is the person that changes a person's life. You have a great teacher, they change everything. So really the important thing here is to move teachers' pay scales upward, but also developing and rewarding excellence in the teaching profession. So the teaching profession also has to become a meritocracy. I use the example of Marva Collins, who was a school teacher in Chicago, to identify principles of success. And interestingly enough, the atmosphere that she created in her classroom was one where these three civic virtues prevailed.
Now, in a chapter on foreign policy, you highlight how the Apollo astronauts' perspective was changed by seeing the Earth from the moon. How does that relate to the theme of that chapter?
I quote Frank Borman, who was the Apollo 8 commander. He put it, "Why the hell can't we live together like decent people?" And my point there is that America is in a really good position to lead the world in the direction of world peace. And the reason why is because America has had to struggle with the challenges of diverse populations. Unlike many societies, we have a lot of volunteer organizations, non-governmental organizations that are in the trenches working on solving social problems. And we also have individual freedom and strong democratic values. So if we can balance the values of individualism and community, we have a lot of the ingredients of a mature world civilization. And I think that's where, America especially has great potential to lead the world in the right direction. Now, the civic virtues help pave that path. Right? With the civic virtues, adversarial debate gives way to collaborative learning, radical individualism morphs into more of a spirit of community, and protest is replaced by acts of service. So it's also about how our political culture matures and moves forward.
Do you think that these solutions are really practical?
Well, I anticipated that question, and the final chapter of the book actually addresses that question head on. So suppose I was your doctor and you came into my office plagued by health problems caused by smoking, junk food, and lack of exercise. Now, if I was a good doctor, would I just give you a pill and lead you to believe that, now just take this pill and things will be okay? Or would I be honest and I'd tell you that to have better health, you have to live a healthier lifestyle? If I was a good doctor, I'd tell you the truth. So the question is, how are you going to get motivated to make the needed lifestyle changes? Well, of course, that's the $64,000 question. But the first task is to be honest about what we think is wrong with American society and suggest what we believe to be the best remedies. So that being said, the narrative is woven around real-world examples where people do the right thing, and in each case we can see the good results. So the book really is an invitation to be inspired by those examples and to overcome paralysis of will and get involved in some way. So whatever your status in society, be rich or poor, corporate executive or worker, public servant or private citizen, you can find a role to play in making our society work better.
In your opinion, who should buy this book?
As I said at the beginning, any American who cares and wants to find better solutions to our country's problems.
Time is getting very short, so the most important question, where can readers find you and your book?
My Twitter handle is BFAULL19, and the book is on the Amazon website.
Well, this has been just great. Our guest today has been Brian Aull, and Brian is the author of The Triad, 3 Civic Virtues That Could Save American Democracy. Brian, thanks very much for being with us today.
My pleasure, Don. Thank you.
This is Don McCauley wrapping up another edition of The Author Show. Please share this interview with your family and your friends so that they too may have the opportunity to discover our guest and his work. And why not spread the word on social media? We look forward to you joining us next time for another great book and another great author on The Author Show.
Thanks for listening to The Author Show. To contact us, call toll-free 1-877-955-8800. That's 877-955-8800. Or visit theauthorshow.com. That's theauthorshow.com. Tune in next time to another great author on The Author Show.